Supercross 2000 landed on the Nintendo 64 consoles in late 1999 in North America and early 2000 in Europe. Being the first entry into a series is always a tricky task. Perhaps trying to cash in on the ever popular fad of extreme sports, which had kicked off with the release of Tony Hawk's, EA decided they too wanted a bite of that pie. After NHL 99 didn't exactly set sales figures alight, EA set MBL Research on a new task of creating a Supercross game from scratch. Now EA are known for their simulations, and so no surprises that this game sticks firmly into the simulation aspect of motocross racing, rather than a more arcade-like experience found in games like Top Gear Hyperbike. Now right off the bat, I'd like to say that this is not an easy game just to pick up and play. That pretty much all boils down to the physics of the game, which are horrific. It's like some very beta version of a ragdoll engine, and even trying to get your rider to drive in a straight line feels near impossible. Even the slightest touch of the analog stick, or the press of the D-pad, will start your rider moving on a direction which it feels almost impossible to bring them back from. It feels as if they have no muscle mass to be able to bring the bike back under control, and you'll often end up in a wonky game of pressing left and right, trying to regain any form of control that you can. It was so bad to begin with that I wasn't even sure if my controller was on the way out, and so I tried 3 different other control pads. I mentioned something similar with my review of Jeremy McGrath's Supercross, and it more or less feels the same thing here, albeit this is somewhat worse. You don't get the luxury of nice smooth drifting turns here, and so everything in the control department feels stiff, rigid, and that you're never more than a second away from losing complete control. And that's actually when you do have control. Pretty much every race I played in the game involved at least one incident of sticking to the environment or clipping with it. When the races are often close affairs, the moment this happens you'll be overtaken and find it near impossible to regain the lead. Should you fall off your bike or get knocked off it by an opponent, you'll also restart facing the exact way you were when you were knocked off. This means that if you were aiming in the wrong direction or slightly out of kilter before being knocked off, then you're going to be losing valuable seconds when you do get started again because you'll need to realign yourself. I also feel that the pacing in the game is way off. In order to actually make a turn without flying off your bike, you'll need to slow down dramatically. And that's the only way that you'll be able to awkwardly get around the turn before then needing to accelerate like crazy to regain the lost speed. The sheer amount of turns in any motocross track will make you quickly realise that the game feels like a constant start-stop affair, and free-flowing racing isn't going to be found here. The modes to play in the game are pretty much limited, but they are standard. You have your basic practice, season and one-off race modes. But by the year 2000 I think we were accustomed to getting track creators, create a rider and some other cool features like that, and sadly none of those are in this game. There's not much here that allows you to inject any of your own personality into it, and instead you're left with choosing from a selection of real riders and courses, and the majority of which nobody will have ever heard of before. The fairly deep stunt and trick system in the game will be missed by many gamers, because there's so few times to use it in the main season mode given the nature of the racing. Then, the 3 special stunt arenas will offer only a momentary escape from the monotony of the core game. Now I've no doubt that there will be some of you watching who have fond memories of the stunt arenas, but in this day and age it's far too limited and rough around the edges to get much enjoyment from. But it's not all negative in Supercross 2000 however. Graphically this is a great looking game. With the expansion pack turned on here for this review, you can see that it wipes the floor with the PlayStation 1 version of the game, and it really shows the added power that the expansion pack allowed the console to produce. As expected, the high-res mode does drop the frame rate somewhat, as it does in pretty much all N64 games that allow use of it, but here it's not as obvious as other games. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that with the high-res mode turned on, the graphical improvements outweigh the downsides. The high-res mode is turned off by default, perhaps because the game runs beautifully without it. But with so many riders on screen at the same time, it's inevitable that at times with either the expansion pack on or off, and with collisions and cornering happening, the game will slow down with or without it turned on. But no matter which visual mode you choose, the animation level is really well done. EA, even back then, were known for being able to get humans animated very well in their games, and Supercross 2000 is no exception. Your riders seem to interact independently with your bike, giving it a sense of realism and a lifelike quality. The opponents also don't seem to be fixed on a set path, and can independently adapt to the courses and the races as they happen. And speaking of the courses, they too adapt. As each race progresses, the courses will also change as they get churned up and torn all over. This makes each lap in the game feel different than the last, and it also ensures that you don't become complacent when racing. I personally would have liked to have seen more outdoor courses, for example those which take place in forests or in the desert, but the courses that are here are all based on real courses that they're showing off. And sure, they can feel very similar very quickly, but there's enough of a mix here to keep things interesting, even if visually they do feel pretty bland. In another plus is the game's audio department. Both the music and effects are superb. Starting off with the music are a selection of alternative style rock bands that play their tracks that fit in with the popular music scene of when the game was released. Now it sounds like more of a time capsule, but it was still cool to hear this, and it only plays during the menus unless you turn it on for the races. The quality is also way above average, and it's cool to hear that the console can produce such clean audio, especially when it's actual music tracks. The effects are also well done. Each rider has a slightly different sounding engine, and this is because the game also has the licenses for many models, and so at certain times when racing you'll know who's coming up behind you just by the sound of their engines. The effects have a rugged roughness to them which I liked. I just would have liked to have heard more screaming and yelling to really drive home the aggression in the races, but that is a minor nitpick. Perhaps the weakest part of the sound is the commentary. Now credit to David Bailey because he worked with the script he was given, but it never sounds fluid. Too many of the announcements either sound disjointed or overly delayed, which does become a distraction, especially if you listen to it to try and work out what's going on elsewhere on the course. Some of the lines are also cringeworthy. In one instance a rider took a huge jump and the commentator asked if they're serving pretzels on his flight. It gave me a mild smirk the first time I heard it, but then after hearing it each race for the whole season, it soon became irritating. Overall though, despite having some impressive visuals and some great audio, it's hard to recommend the game. I don't think that simulations work for motocross games in general, and those such as Excitebike 64 and Top Gear Hyperbike are much more enjoyable to play. Supercross 2000 by EA also misses some great features which could have made this game a great start to the series, but instead it feels like a hollow experience, and one where the physics and controls deliver the final nail in the coffin. Avoid the positive reviews from when the game was first released because this isn't an enjoyable game. And so for today's topic of conversation, I'd love to know why you feel that EA dropped the Supercross series of games after just 2 releases. Do you think that they realised that the fad was over, or do you feel that their resources were better used improving the series that they already had that were established? As always, let me know your thoughts and feelings, comments and opinions in the section down below, and until next time.